Back online.
You did it, Glitch!
Welcome back, your most majestic majesty.
Here we go.
Death traps. Warbots. 5 planet-destroying cannons. And a surveillance state covering the entire city. If only that blasted Dimensionator still worked.
Clank.
Huh?
Let's see here. Am I coming through now? Lord, I just want the audio to come through. Is it working? Ah. Let's see here. Ah, finally. Good Lord. That took enough. Lord, I just want the audio to come. Sorry about all of the confusion, folks. I realized this was a pain in the ass. So it turns out that some of the usability options for PlayStation are not the greatest in the world. Yeah, sorry about the echo. That was temporary. I was just trying to make sure that it was actually coming through. Yeah. Anyway, now that we're up online, so right now we're about an hour into the game. It probably would have been a little less than an hour up to this point if I was actually, specifically trying to get through pretty quickly. But yeah, so we're about an hour into the game. Just got past most of the tutorial sections and stuff. Yeah, right now we have been separated from Clank. We're going through Nefarious City. This is one of the first levels, or at least parts of this section were the first that were made for the game. If you hop into the game, you'll see a really long area with a street, which was actually, it started out as a tech demo for Sony, which is pretty cool. And it expanded from there. So I'm going to let this cinematic play out, and then once it gets to gameplay bits, I'm going to do things like go into photo mode. I'm going to talk a little bit about shaders, textures, character models, all kinds of stuff. For context, if you don't really know who I am, I was the lead character artist on Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart for the better part of a year, almost 2 years ago now, from its pre-pro phase, which was very short, into full production, and then I left for greener pastures. But in my time on the project, I made both the main character models, which were then later tweaked by other artists, parts of them rebuilt, etc. I'll get into that later. And now I am playing the game for the first time, so let's continue. So we're going to continue the cinematic. Once it gets to gameplay, I'm going to get really into... I'm going to dive into how we made some of these models. All these models, textures, all that type of thing. Give some credit to artists who worked on it. Call out some of the stuff that other folks did. And just basically try to give some context for the art that went into the game. So Sargasso, this level, was also one of the first ones that was worked on early in production. And Rivet here was one of the characters that I worked on. Clank was remodeled and up-res by Jason Fitch. and I believe the lighting in this scene was done. Well, the lighting was done by the lighting team. Oh, there's another one of my characters. The lighting was done by the lighting team, mostly led by. Oh my goodness! Oh, there's another one! Yay! Oh boy! Wow, I was not expecting that character to be animated in that way. That big dinosaur thing is one of the ones that I worked on. Goodness. Oh, good lord. Yeah, so this is a really interesting section. So this section right here was one of the first actual levels to be worked on by the environment team. Also part of sort of a tech demo for Sony. The process that went into it was pretty interesting. They took parts of levels from previous Ratchet games and updated them, stitched them together, built out new areas. So these frog guys that you can see right here, these were taken from previous Ratchet games and up-resed. This bug here was made by Mackenzie Patrick. She was one of the interns at the time, and she's now working at Blizzard on the WoW team. So this little bug has been here, has been in the game since the beginning, and actually I want to go into photo mode and zoom in on it, because it's pretty cool. There was a lot of work that went into getting this guy right. So let me see, how can I hide? There we go. So yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff that went into making this little bug. Mackenzie worked really hard on this. Her work is super good. So this was one of the first characters for the game that was actually modeled from scratch. And a lot of development went into just making sure that this little guy looked correct. So you can see that the interior of this bug's eyes was actually modeled out. There was a bunch of work that Mackenzie did, and there was a bunch of work that I and other artists did to actually make it work. I was responsible for putting those little balls on the inside. You can actually see there's some pretty fun shader work going on here. There's additive layers for the facets and stuff. There are two little spheres on the inside that have sort of Fresnel rendering on them, self-illumination and stuff. Lots of different layers there. Let me see, I don't know all the controls for, let's see here, down and up, okay. There's a lot of fun stuff that went into this. The wings here are actually just 3D planes that are sort of bent in space, and they have a shader on them, which every frame or two it pops back and forth between one texture or another. When I was working on it, it was just, I believe it was just fully emissive, but now you can actually see there's a little bit of reflection on them. Looks like there's some cube map or even ray trace reflection on it, which is really cool. It's a really neat little detail that they added. But yeah, it's great to see this bug remains, because this was something that was sort of a showpiece for Mackenzie. She's a really excellent artist. You should follow her on ArtStation. You can find her as Mackenzie Cade. That's Cade with a K at the beginning. And yeah, like I said, she's on the WoW team now. She's making all kinds of really cool character models for them. Let's see here. Norwick says these poly counts are crazy. Yeah, I believe this little bug right here. Last I checked, it had something like 35,000 tries. But it may have changed in the interim. There's a pretty robust use of things like Simplygon for all the characters to ensure they have level detail models. So that's something you see on Rivet here. It's something that you'd see on Clank. So Rivet and Ratchet were initially modeled by me. I didn't make Rivet's hammer, but I did make her initial character model. Then Leroy Chen and a couple of other really highly skilled character artists took it from there after I left the company. So Leroy was actually responsible for remodeling both Ratchet and Rivet's heads to bring them more in line with some of the art direction notes and stuff that we were getting. I think he might have also done some work on her scarf, but I'm not sure. And then there was a bunch of material work and other passes that the artists did to bring them up to spec. Rivet was one of the first characters that was worked on as like a full character, and that was partially because we just needed her to actually work. There were a lot of different stages in building her, mostly because we wanted something that could work right alongside Ratchet. The goal was to have her be a little bit unique while sharing a bunch of the same rig and animations and stuff, because it was important for the characters to feel familiar and similar. Oh, and it looks like... Oh, look at that. There's a little hole right there. That's probably my fault. So that little hole you can see in her boot is probably because I didn't weld some verts or something like that, and so it got picked up in the skinning pass that the riggers did. That's crazy. So yeah, Rivet and Ratchet both have between like 200 and 250,000 tries, and then there's a bunch of additional work from people like Leroy Chen to add things like these strands that you can see here. The strands were the work of Chris Perella and Jay Twassen. Chris was one of the people responsible for developing the strand tech. Let me see if they have the strands for this hair. I'm not sure. Let me see here. I'm not sure if they actually used strands for her hair. Initially, they were just strips of polygons. But let me change the camera settings, and we can take a look at that. Yeah, so yeah, it looks like they did use strands for the hair, which is cool. It's cool to see. Initially, those were just strips of polygons with alpha masking on them. So it's cool to see that they were able to get those strands in there. They also added strands to areas like the edges of the ears for better shape breakup, which is nice to see because sharp edges like this don't play well with the fur shader, which Ratchet and Rivet have. So if I zoom in here on her face, you can see that I'm not sure how visible it's going to be in the video since it's pretty high res, but you might be able to see a little bit of like noisy detail there right at the edge. That's actually because the fur is a shader, which is made by extruding out shells of polygons. Under certain circumstances, you might also see like polygon sorting issues and stuff, which is sort of an artifact of it being a shader. But in most places, it's fine. Yeah, you can see more of those strands here on the base of her tail as well. They did that because there's only so much that you can do with the shader-based fur. And then, of course, here is Clank. So Clank was fully remodeled by Jason Fitch, fully remodeled, retextured. We based him off of both models from previous games and the model from the movie. I don't think that he shares any actual topology with the one from the movie, since there were a few art direction things we wanted to change. But Jason did a really excellent job. Yeah, you can follow him on ArtStation as well. It's Jason, Jayson, Fitch, Fitch. Highly recommend following him on ArtStation. He's also on Twitter. Really excellent artist, really excellent guy. I believe he's actually getting married. If not right now, then pretty soon. So yeah, these frog guys right here, these are actually based on frogs from previous Ratchet and Clank games. Folks like Saul Brennan, they did a really excellent job of getting the rigs and animations transferred over from super old models and rigs and animations and stuff. And then outsourcers and some of our internal artists, well, I guess, since I'm no longer an Insomniac, their internal artists helped to update them so that they're higher res. So you can see things like some tiling textures right here. All this is built into the shader, and Yeah, you can see there's some nice subsurface scattering as well. Really cool stuff. All these shaders and stuff also built by folks like Chris Perella and Jay Twasson. They are also on Twitter and I think on ArtStation, so check out their stuff as well. They're really excellent tech artists. Let's see here. Fredermus says, I can't stay to watch the whole stream. Will you have a video up somewhere? Yes, this video is going to be archived on Twitch, so it should be available as soon as this stream is over. I'm also going to try to get the streams archived on YouTube. That's not something I've done directly from the PS5 before, so I'm going to see what I can do. Hopefully, I should be able to get this stream up by tomorrow. If not, then you'll have to just watch it on Twitch over the next couple weeks. Thanks everybody for stopping by. I see that we have 20 people watching, which is pretty crazy. I very rarely stream things, so it's nice to see a good turnout here. If you want to find more of my stuff, I'm on Twitter, but that's probably how you found me. So anyway, yeah, let's get back to actually playing, and I'll just do some running commentary as we go. So let's just do confirm that. Let's just get these frog guys done. So a lot of the environment textures and models. Oh, I never noticed that little skeleton guy before. A lot of these environment textures and models were done by folks like Matt McAuliffe. He was one of the material artists who was working at Insomniac a while ago. He's now working at other places, and there's also some work from, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting names. I will come up with them. I'm really terrible at remembering names. So this big dinosaur guy, and I think, so this big dinosaur guy was one of the models that I did early on in production when they were still building out the early versions of this level. One thing I want to take a look at, so you can see that he's got these big rocks for his feet. Now I hope, the rocks that I made were replaced by the environment team, because I'm not an environment artist, I'm a character artist, and I'm sure they would be much better qualified to make rocks. But some of the work that I did was in making this big dinosaur model, all the rocks that went onto him. The initial goal for this big dinosaur guy was that you'd be able to sort of walk on his back and go through the level. Oh, there's one of those nice little animations. He's going to eat that thing. Oh, there it is. He just ate one of these big pumpkin-y looking things. So the initial goal was to make something that the player could actually traverse across, which is why he has big rocks on his back. This was a pretty interesting model to work on because it ended up being way larger and more high poly than it should have been. I think the final model was something like 500,000 triangles or something obscene like that. And it looks like they added a little more detail than what I had in there before. There's a lot more blades of grass. When I was working on it, there weren't those hanging vines, so they added some really great details in there. And you can also see, I'm not sure how much we can see, but you can also see that there's some nice scales on there. What I'm looking for, yeah, so if you see the sort of speckle on his face where the scales are, that was sort of a shader-driven effect where I modified the UVs according to a map that Matt McAuliffe made for me. So basically what it did is it spreads out the UVs so that each one of those little scales takes up one pixel of the color map, so that I can have some nice noise in there and have each one of those scales represented by just a solid color. We did that so that this could feel a lot more high detail than it was, because I only really had a couple of 4K maps to play with, and as you can tell, this guy is quite big, so even at this size, two 4K maps just wasn't going to cut it detail-wise. So you can see that this tiling detail made it so that it was a lot easier to get. Some nice detailed scales. Matt McAuliffe was also one of the ones who made this nice scale normal map. So yeah, check his work out as well. I believe he's on ArtStation, probably Twitter. Let's see here. Charlotte Lay is asking how the eyes are set up. So I'm not sure what work was done in the interim between me leaving and the final models getting made. But when I was working on them, the eyes had a pretty simple emissive setup. It was just a diffuse texture with emissive turned on, and I don't know if we're going to be able to see them up close, but I don't think that they had anything like a parallax on the pupils or anything like that. That might have changed in the interim. It's been almost 2 years since I worked at Insomniac, so things have changed. So that big centipede thing that just flew by, that was the last thing that I actually worked on while I was at Insomniac. It was actually still a work in progress as I was getting ready to move on to another job. And I feel really sorry for all of the tech artists there because I probably ruined some of their days, or several of their days. The final model ended up being over 1 million triangles, which is just an unreasonable number for anything in a game, unless it's a level. But as you'll see, hopefully I'll be able to get to it later on in this stream. It has a really large effect on gameplay, or rather, it is part of gameplay to an extent that it needed to be pretty high poly. But given the time constraints I was under in trying to get the model finished, the model UVs finished, I didn't have time to actually do all the texturing and stuff. So any texturing on that you see is going to be courtesy of the folks on the art team. I believe Marco Villalpando had a hand in some of that, and possibly Damon Chimarusti. He was one of the interns at the time. And Marco was, at the time, a junior artist. I believe some of the work was also done by the environment team, though I honestly can't say for sure. They got to it well after I was done there. The wasps! Oh my goodness! Let's see here. Do you know how tall Ratchet and Rivet are in real-world measurements? I'm not sure if that's something that's outlined in modeling. That is actually an excellent question. I don't know the exact answer, how tall they are, but I know that both Ratchet and Rivet are not much taller than like a meter. Most of the characters are much taller than Ratchet and Rivet. Ratchet and Rivet should be almost exactly the same height, though. Let's see here. Go away, bugs. And they are actually some of the shorter characters in the game. Oh my goodness. Ooh. I don't think I was supposed to land in that slime. Yeah, so here you can see a little better view of the entire body of that dinosaur creature. You can see that it has 6 legs. You can see those big spiky rocks and stuff. I'm not sure if they managed to actually work one of those dinosaurs into the traversal, but during the early stages of when I was on the game, there was I think a gold bolt hidden somewhere where you had to traverse across one of their backs. But I guess we'll see. So something interesting to note is that while big creatures like that sort of dinosaur thing and lots of these bugs do have, or did have, high poly models that were sort of the source for texture bakes, Ratchet and Rivet did not. Oh my goodness, look at all these guys. Oh. So Ratchet and Rivet were actually modeled at final res, probably to the chagrin of people like Chris Perella, who was the lead technical artist. along with Saul Brennan, who was the rigging lead. I really should have optimized them a lot more. Probably should have actually baked some textures instead of just applying them. But you know, I had limited time and resources to work with, so unfortunately, there were some corners that I had to cut. I'm sure that when Leroy got his hands on these characters, he did some optimization, though I'm not sure how much he was able to do.
The Mortse's helper bot must have wandered in through the roots somehow.
There is the speeder. Hitting its nest might get its attention.
So this is interesting. When I was originally on the project, this nest is, it looked vastly different from this. It was more of a mound with these eyes popping out of it. So at some point during production, they must have realized that there were some readability issues with that, especially since when I was on the project, it kind of looked just like this dirt texture. So what I assume happened is they decided, you know what, we need something a little more visually interesting and something a little more different. So they went and remodeled it, which is cool. It's a neat thing to see from early production to the final. One of the questions I'm getting is it important to get the main characters up and running? Yeah, it's so. There have been a lot of Ratchet and Clank games, but to the best of my knowledge, none of them have had the same type of second main character that this one has, where she has almost the same amount of screen time as Ratchet. So it was pretty important to get a model working for Rivet pretty early in production, so that we could make sure that she was readable as a different character, so that we could make sure that any animations were all going to work properly. There was also an idea early in production, which I believe got scrapped, to have her hand open up and reveal what is now her hammer. So the idea was originally that she was going to have the hammer as an actual physical part of her body, or an actual physical part of that robot arm that she has. But that was scrapped in favor of giving her the hammer. Let's see here. If it's not too much to ask, could you chat about some differences between Ratchet and Rivet? Now, you talked about her being more buff. There's some facial shape differences, but anything else of interest? I mean, there are obvious model differences, like her boots and her outfit. In terms of her being physically different, there's only a limited amount that we could do to make her physically different. Early on in production, I did want to try and make her a little more, I guess he'd describe it as thick, have a more substantial body than Ratchet does, because he has kind of, he's basically just a series of evenly shaped tubes. And one of the earlier concepts had her with a little bit more of a rounder body shape, but there are just various reasons that that wasn't something that we could do. We definitely wanted her to have a silhouette that was similar to Ratchet's. There were animation considerations to keep in mind. You have to keep, like, if you want the skeletons to be very similar, which we did for things like sharing animations and making sure that all of the level metrics and stuff work, they had to be fairly similar. So it was important to make sure that they were close enough to having the same body that they weren't impossible to port animations and stuff over for. So that's why you'll see that Ratchet and Rivet have pretty similar body types. You might notice that their walk cycles and run cycles are pretty similar. Oh! Okay, so this is fun. 1 second, I want to watch this. So that little fuzzy guy, which I guess are called the Morts now, early in production, that was one of the characters that I worked on, and there was going to be an idea, or there was an idea explored kind of early on that they were all the same, like literally the same character throughout the level, or that they were all indistinguishable from each other, and the only thing that would be different would be their voices. I'm not sure how much of that carried over. I know that some of them are currently not wearing their helmets, but I don't know what. Or I'm excited rather to see what any differences were, because the design of them is one that I find really, really funny, and they were a lot of fun to work on. You might notice once I get a chance to actually get closer to them that they have these goofy little horns and they're covered in fur. Once I beat these guys, we'll take a closer look at them. I had a lot of fun making them, and giving them that kind of Midwestern voice is something that I'm really excited about. There were a lot of conversations about what types of voices different characters should have, and I know that a Midwestern voice was something that a lot of people latched onto for those little guys. All right, let's see if I can beat these dudes. I'm terrible at video games, as you can probably see. I'm also looking at a lot of the art and stuff, so it's a lot of multitasking going on here, which I'm famously bad at. Oh, here we go.
Good, you're okay.
When we heard those fellas were after our lab backs, we were worried about you. The next thing we know, you're here saving our behinds.
Wait, where are the others?
Well, some of the Morts are stuck inside of that mess there. Not a clue what it is. All I know is it keeps getting bigger. Oh, between that and our new neighbor up there, we're not going to revive.
Oh, there it is. There's that centipede.
Don't worry, I'll take care of it. Oh, and to keep you all busy while I'm gone, got this at Zerky's. Mort can finally fix that ship she's been working on.
Zerky's? Oh, those pirates didn't get you any trouble, did they?
Only a little.
You can give this to Mort yourself once you get her from that purple mess over there.
Okay, let's zoom in on these folks, because I just love them so much. They were, aside from that centipede, they were one of the last things that I worked on while I was still at Insomniac. And they've had a lot of tweaks since I left, but I just love them so much. So these are another one of those examples of characters where not a lot of their textures were actually baked from a high poly. They do have some of that, like some of these wrinkles that you can see, like on the butt and the backs of the knees. Those were baked in, but others like the, let's see here, like these boots. I don't think there was actually a high poly for these boots. I just modeled them at final res and baked textures from the model onto itself. So then I just dumped it into Substance Painter, and away I went. Oh, looks like there might have been a little bit of baking on, yeah, that cuff. You can see a little bit of normal map funkiness, a little bit of waviness. But in general, most of this was just baked from itself to itself. Someone says, have you talked about the fur tech for Ratchet and Rivet? Only a little bit, but it's all fairly simple. So there's a technique that you can use in shaders where essentially what you're doing is you're duplicating an existing polygon and extruding it outward along its normal. You can do that as many times as you like in theory. So that's what you see on Rivet's hair here. So let me zoom in again, and we might be able to see some of that. So right along the edge of the nose there, you can see that it's a little bit noisy and a little bit furry. So that's actually done by extruding polygons out from the surface, and the farther out from the surface it gets, the less of the texture is visible through use of a nice noisy alpha texture. So yeah, you can see some of the layers there. And that combined with some individual strands that were placed by, I believe, by Leroy Chen. I know that he was one of the last people to work on it. You can see some of the individual strands at the edges here. So those two things combined led to the final look for Rivet's and Ratchet's fur. Let me see here. So did they use detail maps? Yeah, so these guys right here, they use detail maps. You can see some of it on the cloth here. So the detail map is masked out where you can see that logo. And then I believe if we can get close enough, you can see a little bit of fuzz around the edges. That was something, yeah. Okay, so if you look in the dark area right here inside the glove, you can see that there's a little bit of fuzz at the surface of the cloth. That's something that they implemented actually after I left the studio. It was still early in development. So this is something that you'd see on some of the character models in the last Spider-Man game. So on, say, Miles' face, you might see some peach fuzz around some edges, and this uses some similar tech to that. So it's actually a technique that's pretty similar to the fur shells on Rivet, or the fur shells that you can actually see right here. It's just applied along the surface, and it's a simple emissive. I believe it takes in the environment color. So it just makes it look a little more fuzzy and a little more cloth-like around the edges. You can also see that there's a detail map for the leather on these pouches and straps as well. Is Rivet's muzzle shorter, or am I imagining? You are not imagining. That was something that was specifically part of the art direction for Rivet. So her nose, her muzzle is significantly shorter. That was something that was primarily driven by Leroy when he was working on the heads for both Ratchet and Rivet. So after I left the studio, he went and did a pass on their heads. I believe he completely remodeled them so that they would work better with some of the rigging and animation constraints, along with some of the art direction notes that we were getting. So before I left the studio, Rivet looked significantly closer to Ratchet. She had the same length of muzzle, but they pulled it in to give her a little bit more of a cute look. All right, so let's take a look at this thing. So here's some really nice effects. The effects artists there are so good. So Brianna Lindsay was the lead effects artist at Insomniac, and some of the folks working with her were responsible for a lot of these effects. Some of the materials would have been taken care of by Jay Twasson, who also did things like all of the goo in these barrels. This is all shader-driven stuff inside these barrels, and you can see that it catches the light really nicely over here as well. It's got a little bit of translucency, and it's got these really nice bubbles burbling through it. All that's shader-driven. It's not, to the best of my knowledge, there's no actual 3D bubbles there. And you can actually see at glancing angles, just because of the way that some of the shader tech works, you can actually see the UV seam right here, which Jay would probably get mad at me for pointing that out, just because it's something that's hard to get around without expending a ton of work trying to fix it. Around the edges of these big metal ports, you can actually see some of the trim textures the environment artists were working with. They did a lot of really cool stuff with things like channel packing textures, making trim sheets. Matt McAuliffe was responsible for coming up with a lot of the materials for this, using things like Substance Designer and a lot of procedural work. So really cool stuff all around.
Your rift tether, yes. Try aiming at the rift.
That was
Oh yeah, gold bolts. Alright, so is the fur tech different for the in-game cinematic models, or is it just high-res texture? Well, it's kind of a combination of things. The way that the fur works is you can adjust the resolution of oops, wrong button. You can adjust the resolution of the little tufts. So let's zoom in on here. And let's adjust the field of view so we can zoom in. So you can see on areas here like her chin that there are little tiny tufts of fur. So those are controlled by essentially a noise texture, and you can actually adjust how much that noise texture actually repeats across the surface. Since it's all shader based, and you can adjust the resolution of it. If you want, you can make those tufts bigger or smaller, higher resolution or chunkier. In this case, it was erring on the side of making it really high resolution to look like it's actual nice fine fur. And that is a hell of a look right there. Is the fur tech different for the in-game cinematic models, or is it just high-res texture? Yeah. So, technically it's just a high-res texture, though it's a tiling texture, so the resolution is kind of independent of the model. It doesn't really... It's mostly dependent on how much is tiling in the material and how the UVs are laid out. Alright, so let's take a look at this thingy.
Enter. Got it.
May I take a look? I have some experience with dimensional anomalies.
Sure.
More awesome shader work, most likely by Jay Clausen. This was done well after I was out of the studio, but they were working on these Clank puzzles for almost the entire time that I was there. From very early on in production, they were working on Clank puzzles.
Could be nothing. Be a skating and tropic fissure that will soon turn the entire universe into a formless soup. Time will tell.
Oh dear. Well, I am Clank. Please allow me to help.
Right, yes, Clank! I am the all-seeing cosmic prophet of interdimensional sector 2255 phase Omega. But you can call me Gary. Here we are, former warbot, teamed up with the Lombax, became a hero. Good for you! Ooh.
It's a funny story. The Insomniac offices are located at number 2255.
You might just be the one I've been waiting for! Would you like to help me fix the dimensions?
Do you know how to fix the dimensions? And why are there copies of me running around?
They're your possibilities. The key to repairing this anomaly. But first, pick up that nearby sphere. This is a lift sphere. It can reduce the gravity on any object it touches. It seems your possibilities are what keeps an anomaly from collapsing. They look like you because that's how you interpret dimensionality. But as you can see, they've lost their way. If you can guide them to the meta-terminal ahead, we'll begin to repair this anomaly. Now, enter the meta-terminal and you'll be one step closer to fixing this dimensional anomaly.
I feel like things are slowly starting to make sense, dimensionally speaking.
So this is funny. One of the last playtests that I did when I was at Insomniac was, I believe, on this same puzzle. Oh, this is interesting. Yeah, so I distinctly remember the spinning blades right here. the aesthetic was much more in development at the time. It was largely just gray box, but it was already starting to take shape. It's interesting seeing how they managed to update and change this. It's a really cool thing to see. Ooh.
This should lighten things up.
Alrighty, so let me let's see. There's that one, and I did this in the wrong order. That's okay. Let's see here. Whee! I'm flying! There we go.
May be able to redirect my possibilities. I wonder if some extra speed could help my possibilities cross this gap.
So apologies for not knowing how to do this. It's been a while since I did any of this. Let's see here. Let's see here. Oh, nice. So this is interesting. So where it says skip puzzle, that's actually one of the accessibility one of the options that they added when people just wanted to actually get testing done. And I think they realized in doing accessibility passes for Spider-Man and other things that it was something that a lot of people would want. I'm glad they kept it because I am absolutely horrendous at puzzles. So I'm sure it would be pretty painful to watch me try and get through that on stream.
Whoa! You saved them! How did you do that?
I am uncertain.
Ribbit! Oh, that Vanguard.
Look who it is! You would not believe my luck today. My trip to Nefarious City went totally sideways. I wrecked my ship, and
You go on and leave that one to old Mort. Well, assuming you brought that part I asked for, I'll have this old thing in ship shape.
So I believe this ship model was made by Ryzen, which is they mainly specialize in hard surface models for AAA games and occasionally some movies. So if we go and take a look more closely at it, you can see that it's very highly detailed. They did a ton of great work. And then some of the folks in Insomniac just polished it up once we got the final model to just give it a final material pass and other stuff because, naturally they're not going to have access to all of our files, the engine, that type of thing. So they were able to push it to a certain point, and then final material pass and other stuff was left to the artists at Insomniac. I believe it was Damon Cimarusti. I can never remember how to pronounce his last name, but I believe it was Damon who did some of the final material work on this, and then obviously shaders and stuff were done by Jay Twasson and Chris Perella. This transparent shader was a surprisingly huge pain in the ass to combine with some of the other rendering tech. Getting it actually sorting properly with things like other reflections and, things like the water and shaders over there was it was a big challenge. So I'm glad that they were able to finally use it.
next
All right.
stop's hideout. Just have to load it good somehow.
So the thugs for less, or I guess they're now called goons for less in the final game. That was Sam Magg's idea to make them have these sort of like "whoa, bro" type of voices. She came up with a lot of really great options for different faction personalities, and the goons for less being just absolutely idiotic bros was, I believe, her idea. And yeah, big shout out to Sam for her work on the writing for that. Oh, so UX Doll, I believe that's is that Dahlia? Yeah, so you're right about the accessibility options. The skip puzzle option came in after the Spider-Man testing. And yeah, definitely shout out to Sam. Can we see Mrs. Zircon? Yeah, so let's take a look at Mrs. Zircon. So this is one of Damon's showpieces. Damon Smarusti. This was one of the characters that he worked on, and over the course of a month or so, got it polished up to a really, really nice state. So he took it all the way from the concept being handed to him to the final in-game model. Did some really great material work on it. It was, I'm sure, one of the things that cemented him as getting hired full-time instead of just being an intern. So yeah, really, really solid work there. He even fully modeled out a bunch of interior details that you rarely see. So yeah, hats off. Really just amazing work. Damon is definitely going to go far in his career. Let's actually take a look closer at her. Let me see here. There we go. So yeah, you can see that there's some really nice. He did some really great high poly work, and then a bunch of cleanup later on to make sure that it worked in engine. The actual the workflow that Insomniac uses is a spec gloss workflow rather than metalness and stuff, which is how we can get a lot of really nice transitions between materials without things like halos showing in the materials. Anyway. Let's see here. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm supposed to go across this big ramp right here. Oh my god, this big dinosaur guy. This was modeled based on some older models and concepts which were updated to match some of the specs that we were looking for. Oh god, I hate its eyes. The animators did such a really weird job with it. Did the in-house artist work on the game res model or just sculpting high poly? Yeah, so Damon, he did everything from the initial high poly to the final low poly for Mrs. Zircon. This big T-Rex guy, God, I need to switch weapons, was modeled by the fine folks at Omnom Workshop. I don't know who the artist was who did this, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we provided them with an initial model, which was from one of the older Ratchet games, and then they, following some guidance from art direction and the concept team, they did more work to really bring it up to spec. And then the final material pass was done by artists at Insomniac. I know that Marco Villalpando and Melissa Coleman, or I guess her last name is now, oh my goodness, I'm blanking on her. Kelly, Melissa Kelly, had a hand in doing that as well. Let's see here. Yes, there we go. Nice little puzzle. But yeah, so Omnom Workshop updated an old model and added more detail and such, and then Insomniac did the final polish. And let me see here. I don't remember what I'm supposed to be doing right now. Oh, there we go. are these guys. Pretty interesting coming to this level after having seen it early in production, because initially this was going to be one of the training areas for a lot of different gunplay. They've since expanded this part of the level to have different levels and like actual physical levels to the this platform. Originally, there where you can see those big green sort of oval structures right there, there was a panel to run along, like you would see earlier in the game. So earlier in the game, in case you haven't seen it, Ratchet gets the ability to run along certain walls. So this was going to be one of the areas that taught you how to do that. These Robomuts were actually also up-resed from old models. There were some, I believe, in the 2016 Ratchet and Clank game, which were then up-resed and given some spit and polish by folks like Marco Biopando. These Thugs for Less were up-resed from old models from previous Ratchet and Clank games, also by the Omnom Workshop. Then, of course, yeah, there was an additional material pass and all kinds of, work done to make sure that they worked in engine and such. The engine that Insomniac uses is its own in-house engine. It's not something like Unreal or Unity. It's all built in-house and has been in progress for, I'm pretty sure that there's probably still code from the original Ratchet and Clank game in here. Heck, there are certain enemies that are from the original Ratchet and Clank, which were remade for the 2016 game or up-resed. So yeah, lots and lots of work from lots and lots of people over the course of lots and lots of years.
Now to lower the bridge.
Let's see here. Here we go. So here's another interesting thing. Early in production, it was unclear what Rivet's melee weapon was going to be. I talked about earlier how there was an idea to have it be fully just attached to her robot hand and sort of pop out of it. The hand was actually built, you can see some of the seams on it if you look closely. It was actually built so that it could unfold, and there's a little bit of detail inside. That was something that I worked on over the course of like a month. Unfortunately, that just had to be scrapped for a number of reasons. But the hammer was something that was kind of tested early on, and then people still weren't sure how it was going to function in terms of these types of little interactions. So these types of interactions for Ratchet are the bolt cranks, where he takes his wrench and he twists a screw down into, or I guess a bolt down into a platform. So let's see what this one ends up being. Okay, so... Okay. Yeah, so I am rotating my left stick, and yeah, so it's a pretty similar type of interaction. It's just sort of flavored differently for Rivet. But that little interaction right there, along with this floating platform, has survived from the very earliest stages of production of this level, I believe.
This, but what about the Speedle?
What about it? Oh.
I don't remember what they were originally called, but the Speedles were originally called something different. This guy was also made by the Omnom Workshop, and then I and a couple of other artists had hands in doing final material polish on it. I know that Jay Twasson had a hand in creating the shader for the sort of big bulbous butt. If you take a look at it as it's moving, it has this sort of change in color. Yeah, there it goes. So as it's speeding along, the butt sort of starts glowing. Jay worked with some of the gameplay designers to actually get that working with gameplay events and stuff like that. So let's see here. Oh, jeez. Oh, God. So, do this. Oh. Oh, alright. Take a look at something really closely. I want to see... Okay, so, yeah, here you can actually see that... Oh, wow, nice. Okay, so there's a couple things going on here. One, the shader for this big T-Rex guy, this Grunthor, has a few things going on. It has subsurface scattering, so if we take a look at the tail, you can see some of the light coming through there. For a while, that was kind of a pain in the ass to get working, because we were changing, or Chris Perella was changing the way that subsurface scattering worked in the shader system to make it a little more physically plausible. But unfortunately, that also meant that to actually get subsurface scattering that you can see here with like these nice veins and stuff, it was actually incredibly difficult to do because the scattering is based on world coordinates, or world units rather. So you could only get subsurface scattering to maybe a couple of millimeters. But since this guy is so big, even this thin part of the tail is several millimeters thick. Oh, my wife is walking in the door. Hey, hon. I'll be right back. One moment. So even this part of the tail, which is, ostensibly pretty thin, is actually at least a couple inches thick, and getting that working with physically based subsurface scattering, which you might see on something like a person's ear, which is only maybe a millimeter thick, was a real pain, but they managed it in the end. So another cool thing that's happening is... let's see here. Can we see the eye? Yeah, let's zoom in on the eye. God, I hate these eyes because they're so creepy. Oh, my goodness. So yeah, there's some cool stuff going on with the eye. Yeah, they did change it. So initially, the eyes just had a simple emissive material. And you can see that there's a slight skinning issue there. But unless you're me, nobody's going to notice. So initially, the eyes just had a simple emissive material on them. But at some point in production, they were talking about having, I and some other people were talking about having slightly more physically plausible eyes with like refraction and reflection. So you can see that as I move to the side here, you can still see some of that pupil because of refraction. So there's some cool shader stuff going on there. That's work from folks like Jay Twasson and Chris Perella. And then some of the other artists would have actually got it working on here. God, I hate this guy. So the other thing that I was going to point out was these little bullet hits. So from a distance, they just look kind of like they're flat splats, but if you go to the side, you can actually see that they have some parallax occlusion mapping. That was something that I know Jay Twasson wanted to get working for a lot of different effects, and it looks like they actually did. I know it was kind of a pain to get working on skinned meshes before, but now it looks like it actually works properly. So, yeah, hats off to them. They're a really, really good shader artist, and the stuff that they do is super cool. You should follow them on Twitter. They're just JB Twasson on Twitter. They post a lot of cool stuff. All right, let's back out of here and finish this little mini boss. Oh, you can see that big flying centipede guy going over. I'm gonna run out of ammo, aren't I? Yep. Here I go. Oh, there's more of those frogs. Oh! Ooh. And there we go. That guy's down. Okay.
Now for my final enemy, the Mortis pressure marks.
So this is also one of the puzzles that survived from very early on in production. So you notice that as I run along here, I can't actually switch on all of the switches at the same time. Yep. And so using one of these speedles was one of the puzzle ideas that the design team came up with. So a lot of these speedle-related puzzles were there from the earliest stages of production. They have some really cool design folks working on this type of stuff. All right. Okay. So this is one more area that changed drastically over the course of even early production.
Especially when they're tearing
This
their
is,
galaxy.
yeah. So a lot of things in this area changed, and there were many ideas about what this area would look like, what type of environment it would be, whether it would be something like with all these bones, or if there were going to be more glowing plants and stuff. At some early point, there was even a sort of an idea for some sort of big dragon-like creature to be in here. Which then went through many iterations. At certain points, it was going to be Ratchet. At some points, it was going to be Rivet. We just knew that this sort of cave area was going to be in here. So it's cool to see what has changed, what stayed the same. I will say that in the earliest stages of production, Brian Mullen, who was one of the lead lighters on the team and was responsible for a lot of lighting in this level, did a bunch of really cool lighting passes with glowing plants and spotlights and all kinds of other things that alternately were super efficient or brought the early hardware to its knees. So it's really neat seeing all this stuff in motion in the final game, because it just went through so many different iterations. All right, let's take a look at this. So this is interesting as well, because instead of this being Rivet's sort of hideout for a long, long time, this was actually going to be the initial stage for a boss room, and we would just run into the boss, and that would be the start of the boss fight. So clearly, over the course of production, things changed. There was a lot of new information that came out of writing, and lots of ideas that got bandied about to actually make this area work in terms of gameplay and story.
Okay. So, you were being honest.
As I have been saying repeatedly.
Let's see here. Ooh, I love the UI shifts with the camera. Yeah, so UI was something that was a really big focus for a lot of people, especially people like Gil Doran. He and a lot of the other folks on the UI team were doing some really cool stuff at the time that I was leaving to actually get UI working to the degree that we wanted in the Insomniac engine. Previously, they were using things like Scaleform and other stuff, and I believe what they landed on was sort of a hybrid solution with 3D planes and a little bit of middleware. So, yeah, really cool stuff. The UI and UX teams were just some of the best people in Insomniac. right. So yeah, here's that that big mechanical centipede that I worked on. So, let's see here. Yep. So early on in production, it was supposed to be Nefarious who was driving this. So you would be chasing after Nefarious for, I don't remember the reason, but the whole goal was that you'd get up there and smash through into the cockpit and try to defeat him, that type of thing. So this actual chase scene right here has been in there almost from the beginning. The model, you might actually be able to see some of the shifts in LODs depending upon how quickly I move around it, that type of thing. But yeah, the actual production of this took a really long time. And like I said before, I was the one who worked on the majority of the modeling, and then as production went along, other folks took care of texturing and getting the materials and stuff together. Let's see here. Definitely want a ramp. Oh, here's a ramp. There we go. So yeah, this thing was designed specifically so that this big long strip along its back would lead you to that big target. So let's zoom in on some of this stuff. I want to see what types of details survived. So yeah, so you can see that all this detail is fully modeled out. There were a couple of different reasons to do it this way. One was I just didn't have time to do things like model out a high and low detail version to bake textures. So there are no actual baked normal maps on here aside from some of these details that you can see in the textures. Everything else is just fully modeled detail. Let's see how much detail was able to remain. Yeah, so some of these things like these bolts over here, or the rivets, some of that is decals that were placed, and it looks like, if we get close enough, yeah, so you can see that there are different level of detail models that pop in. So this model was a huge pain, I think, for everybody involved, because from the very start we knew that we needed it to be almost level sized on its own, like it would be the size of a boss arena. And you can actually see right here, there are some areas that are LODing out just because, well, that's just what we do. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, LODs are still based on the position of the character. So the farther you are from the character bounding box or the character origin, the lower detail you're going to get. So let's see here. I believe the first LOD starts at maybe 5 meters away, maybe less than 5 meters away from where Rivet is right now. So she's got some sort of bounding box or just a locator at her origin point, and then the farther that you get from that, the lower LOD you're at. So you can see the LOD pop in on the tail right there. That's happening because the camera is farther away from Rivet. So it's I believe that's just a quirk of how the Insomniac engine handles LODs, but yeah. So in terms of how do you manage the texel density? So texel density is based on a couple of things. One, all of these different sections, you can see that the back of this thing is split into different sections. So all of the different legs on the sides here, I believe they should all share the same UV space, and then each of the different sections shares a UV set. The tail back here, these big flaps, those share a UV set, and then all of the actual textures are just tiling textures. So you can control the texture tiling on a shader level instead of having to futz around with the actual UVs. So you'll notice that if I zoom in really close here, you can see that there's really high detail in these textures, and none of that is actually uniquely mapped. It's all just in the UVs. These all just share the same space, and then it repeats the UVs in the shader. Let me see here. What kind of pop-in are we getting here? Yeah, not much right there. Anyway, so let me get closer to the sort of head of this thing, and we can take a look at some of the details that were modeled there as well. Just pop in there. Pause that. Go back to photo mode. All right. So there you can see on that orange dome, there's that same shader that was on the dome of the starship. So same type of shader. It's all just a nice solid color. And let me hide that UI. So yeah, all of this detail is just modeled out. I didn't have to, or I didn't have the time or the inclination or energy to go and bake all of this information. So it all just uses tiling textures and any normal maps you see are just tiling ones that are in the textures. Like all this stuff right here, all that's just in the texture, in the material. It's just repeating stuff. So we got some questions. Are you setting up basic shader stuff yourself and handing it off to tech artists in cases like this? In this case, I didn't really do much in terms of creating shaders. I made an initial shader for these red stripes that had sort of a repeating, blinking sort of effect, but the final actual texture creation and look dev was done by Jay Twasson and Chris Perella. They were responsible for getting the final actual materials for these set up. All I did was a little bit of look dev. Let's see here. Yeah, I think that's all of the questions at the moment. But yeah, so you can see that all of this detail, including all the stuff in there, is fully modeled out. So let me pop this back to lower FOV, and we can zoom in there. There we go. So yeah, lots of fully modeled detail with just some repeating texture elements. You can see that some of the curvature and stuff is just it's baked from the model onto itself. And there are just tons of bevels and stuff. All of these tubes are just fully modeled out. And once again, I just didn't have the time in certain cases to actually bake a lot of detail, which is why most of this is just tiling texture. One of the few cases where I actually did paint things individually was some of the streaks around where you can see these big launcher things. All those streaks at the end were hand painted in Substance Painter, but then the rest of it is just material work that was done by the very skilled folks at Insomniac. So yeah, this is absurdly highly detailed. It's actually probably way more detailed than it needed to be, but I was enjoying the process. So hats off to the people who actually got the materials done, and I'm sorry, because I'm sure it was a huge pain in the ass. All right, let's get back to some gameplay. So some of the design things that we needed to keep in mind with things like this big centipede guy were how it actually interacts with the player. Oops. So one of the things that the design team wanted, that the combat designers wanted, was a boss fight where you essentially fight something that feels like a giant cobra that's getting ready to attack you. So the concept artists came up with a really cool basic design, which I then did a block out for, The block out went to rigging and animation for some really basic stuff, and it was handed off within a couple days to the combat designers, and they spent months tweaking how this whole battle would work, and there was also a lot of back and forth with the story team and the art team, environment, all kinds of other people to make sure that there was a cool arena that you could be in. There was cool gameplay, and make sure that this guy had lots of cool attacks to do. So I think because it is getting a little bit late on my end. It is now 8:35. I've been streaming for an hour and a half, barring technical difficulties. Once I get finished with this boss fight, I'm going to call it for the night, but I will be back to play a little more, probably tomorrow. I'm going to try and do it at the same time. I'm going to try to do more streaming to give context to a lot of the art decisions that have been made. So, oh my goodness. So yeah, you can see that there were lots of attacks that were planned for this guy. That big laser was made specifically to shoot a laser. These big spikes on the sort of claws and forearms were designed specifically to attack the player and be very visible. And once again, shader work was all done by other artists, not me. I was really only responsible for the modeling. Now, depending on how things worked, we might be able to see some of the damaged states that also got modeled for this. Yeah, here we go.
You're not getting away from me. I can't hit stabilizer until I jump on that thing's back.
Alrighty. Oh, here we go. Oh, you can see some of that really cool shader work done by Jay Twasson on the butt of the beetle. Yeah, so hopefully we're going to be able to see some of the damaged states. So this guy should have some panels popping off pretty soon, if they get the damaged states. If not, it might just explode. We'll find out. I do recall that when I was working on the model for this guy, there was a broken version of the big dome on the front. There were also a bunch of panels that pop off. But a lot of that's also dependent on, how much time do we have? How much, oh, here we go. So yeah, some of it's broken off. Let me see if I can zoom in on this guy. Yeah, so it's a little bit difficult to see because there's just so much going on here. But yeah, you can see that there is a little bit of damaged state going on here. I believe that they needed to make some different breaks to this glass because this isn't what I remember making. So probably what they ended up doing is making larger sections of the glass gone in this stage because what I made initially probably wasn't as readable as it should have been. But yeah, still really cool stuff. You can see that there's a little bit of repeating texture work there, probably because I screwed something up in the UVs. Who knows? also something to note is that I am playing on the easiest mode possible, which is probably why this is going so quickly. Mr. Land Party asks, are you going to be playing other games you worked on stream? I mean, I could. I could probably play some Spider-Man, though I am terrible at that game, and even on the easiest mode, I had a really hard time getting through it. So we'll see. I mean, it would probably be pretty cool to come back to it after, not having played it since, what was that, 2018? Might be kind of a cool thing to take a look at.
This is unfortunate.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, so you can see some of the damage state there with the exposed innards of this machine.
You okay, Bolts?
You came after me. Thank you.
Well, we still got some unfinished business. Ooh, we should see if Mort mixed up the ship.
Alright. Oh, nice. And it looks like they actually added even more damage state goodness. So this texture that you can see in here, which I can zoom in on a little bit. So you can see that it's essentially just a cylinder with a texture, some textures applied. But so I made this this damage texture, which is just a bunch of random tubes and greebles and stuff. I literally just made a bunch of random shapes and textured it in Substance and made it over the course of like a day. And if you play this game and you zoom in on some of the enemies while they're damaged, you can actually see that it's the same texture in all of them. It's just a bunch of random techie-looking shapes that I added in. And then all these tubes and stuff that you see poking out, that's additional stuff that was added on later. But I believe if we go over here, oh, I can't move the camera over there. But there should be more. Oh yeah, there's a panel that has the same set of textures. And yeah, it's it's literally just meant to be a generic internal damage texture for all of the techie enemies in the game. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave it on that note. I think this is a good stopping point, having beaten this boss. So this boss, like I said before, is one of the last things that I worked on. Actually, the day that I was leaving, I finalized all of my modeling and UV work on this model, and then had to hand it off to people. And once again, to those people who ended up having to work on it after I was done, I'm sorry. I know that it was such a huge pain in the ass to work on. It is absurdly high poly, probably way higher detail than it needed to be. Like, you can see that even some of these grooves and stuff were just fully modeled out. I should have been more considerate of others' time, but it is what it is. Anyway, yeah, I think this is a good place to stop with the two characters that I worked on taking up the entire freaking screen. I hope this was a fun stream for people watching. I know that I didn't exactly get very far in the game, but that wasn't really the point, was it? I'm going to be doing more of these streams, so, check out my Twitter. I'm going to be posting times when I'll be doing it. I would like to do it at similar times, like 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Yeah, I will see y'all then. Hope you had a good time, and I will talk to y'all later. Have a good one.
Not